Welcome into Film Tank, the weekly podcast that covers both new and classic cinema. On this episode of Film Tank, we discuss the new film from Ari Aster, which is Midsommar. If you would like to get in touch with Film Tank, you can always email us at filmtankshow@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Film Tank Show. And you can listen to all of our episodes on our website, filmtankshow.com, or on iTunes. And now, here are your hosts, Nick Cheney, Toussaint Egan, and myself, Alex Diekman. Hello there again, friends, and welcome in to episode 197 of Film Tank. As per usual, I am Alex Diekman, along with the usual co-host, Nick Cheney.
Well, let's address that.
Usually I am that person.
Yeah, can we name an episode in which you were not Alex Diekman?
Ooh. It's a fun, upside down episode.
I bet if we check the IMDb trivia page, we could figure it out.
Figure out what?
If there was an episode in which you were not Alex Diekman.
Oh, okay. Do we have an IMDb page?
We do now.
Really?
No.
Thank you for confirming that.
You're welcome.
Also along with us on this wonderful ride we're about to partake in
is Jesus Christ.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
He also doesn't have an IMDb page.
That's not true.
He does?
No.
I'm fucking with you.
Toussaint Egan.
Skull!
Okay. Very good. Very good. Nice Viking reference.
Okay, Jesus just left.
Was he ever here to begin with?
Wow, way to attack my religion.
Which one is that?
That
Wait a minute.
is confidential.
Who's that?
Jesus.
Who's that at the door?
We said...
Alex, who is it?
He's
Why would you ask Alex?
Alex is closest to the door.
See if there's a carpenter coming around the corner. Oh, it's not. It's our friend, Sam Shamara. Not that Jesus isn't our friend, but Sam for sure is. Welcome
I hope I am.
back.
Thank you. Thanks.
Oh, boy.
So we usually get off to raging starts here on this podcast, as I'm sure
Always.
you figured out by this point. Yeah. So just another one, just on the notch.
Just another pin on the board.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think we should get right to it, because I think everyone's got quite a bit to say about the new film from Ari Aster, which is Midsommar. We talked last year about his film that came out around this time. It really is actually quite incredible that this film, Midsommar, got made and released as quickly as it did, since it didn't get greenlit until after Hereditary came out. So that means that it had to get into production, it had to have all of its principal photography, it had to have all of its editing, it had to have its promotional schedule, and then get released in under a calendar year, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
So
especially for something that, while not a blockbuster, is not a one-room talkie picture where you could very easily see like when Joss Whedon wanted to take a break from the Avengers and he called his friends and made that adaptation of Much Ado About Nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
on one
went to go
weekend.
see that. Yeah,
we did.
But this film, kind of to your point, Nick, there's quite a bit of editing that happens here for sure. And definitely a lot of music cues, a lot of
different scenes have to take place at different times of a day, not just day and night. Actually, because they don't spend that many days there, so it's a real time experience as far as the sun has to kind of be setting at certain points and whatnot. So they did a lot in a little amount of time for Hollywood.
Yeah. And we will get to everyone's opinion, but for the most part, ended up with a pretty good product.
Yeah.
So even though I was not a fan of his film from last year, that doesn't mean that I did not like this one.
Oh.
Little tease there. Maybe not. Maybe I didn't like it. I liked it.
Boy.
It's okay.
Yeah.
So Midsommar is written and directed by Ari Aster and stars Florence Pugh and also Jack Rayner. There are some other people who show up here, including Will Poulter, who most people probably remember from either The Maze Runner or We're the Millers. But he's kind of got that hateable face going on kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's some other people here that people may have seen, but for the most part...
Chidi from The Good Place,
Yeah,
William Jackson Harper.
Yeah, he's great.
Okay. Thank you.
Good
Thank
Place
you
is
for
a
proving
great
me
show.
wrong.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Playing the same character from The Good Place. It's very weird.
Pretty much, yeah.
I'm being,
Only half,
I'm exaggerating.
You're only being half facetious, really.
But
I agree
literally
with
in
you.
The Good Place, for anyone who hasn't seen it, he plays an academic who is always trying to figure out what's morally right or wrong and overanalyzes and overthinks everything. So here is just a dialed-back, chilled version of that.
Would you say that The Good Place is Film Tank recommended?
I would say sure.
I would recommend it as well.
Okay.
Watch The Good Place.
I've never seen it. So.
You should watch The Good Place. Both of you should watch The Good
seen it.
Place.
I can see that from what you were saying.
I have thoughts about The Good Place that is not for this podcast. Just because, I meant because it's wildly off topic.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
Which is that I think it's fine.
Okay.
And I admire what it's doing.
Okay.
But the idea that it's a laugh riot is a little far-fetched for me.
Why are you dead inside? Anyway.
So before we get into more about the film, Florence Pugh, as I mentioned, is the main character. I saw her for the first time a couple years ago when Nick went out of his way to show me the film Lady Macbeth, which is fantastic for anyone out there who wants to see good movies. Mm-hmm. And it's mostly fantastic because she is great in it. I mean, the film's good too, but she's great in it. And she also is going to be in the Black Widow movie coming out, playing opposite Scarlett Johansson.
Yeah.
And playing, I guess, kind of like her...
Playing a tree?
Sort of sister?
Only had to wait until the character was dead to finally give her a movie, huh?
Oh,
Hey-yo! It's true!
you're not wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, Marvel apparently has noticed that people want to see, like, not white males.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden they're like, look, we've got LGBT, and we have women, and we have other races. What?
The idea that Marvel is doing anything other than hanging on for dear life and not going in that direction is laughable to me, which is that I'm not saying that they're not coming out with certain property that are checking off certain boxes, and I'm definitely not saying that they shouldn't be moving in that direction.
Right.
But
They're only doing
if
it
they were
because
interested
of,
or even whatever, it wouldn't look at the way that they're doing it.
It wouldn't have taken like 23 films to get to this point where they're finally like courting those sort of ideas.
Only doing it because of the landscape and the
And
commentary
even the landscape
around it.
started years before they started doing it.
Right.
So
they're just moving at a glacial pace.
I guess I'm not trying to say...
I just hear nails
Okay.
on the ground as the general population is dragging Marvel's body out of the room it so badly wants to be locked in, and it's not quite out there yet, but there is blood on the floor, and we'll see who wins.
All right.
I don't know how I
Disney's going to fucking win.
I can't really
no
unpack
matter
that.
what happens.
But Alex, you were about to tell us about Midsommar.
I was.
Yeah.
So according to IMDb, Midsommar revolves around a couple that travels to Sweden to visit a rural hometown fabled Midsummer Festival.
A couple of what?
What begins as an idyllic retreat quickly devolves into an increasingly violent and bizarre competition at the hands of a pagan cult.
Oh boy. Spooky.
Yeah. That wasn't too bad.
That wasn't too bad.
That's about right.
Yeah, I would have taken out increasingly.
I agree.
It's like it feels like a non, like it's an unnecessary modifier because like you could just
I mean, what else do you anticipate the film to do?
It's like it's a decreasingly bizarre and violent film.
Right.
I'm just like,
it
well,
goes back to the norm. What is it?
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
This is what happens when we have copy editors on the podcast.
Yeah.
Now, hold on.
No, wait a minute.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. So I think I'll start us off, actually, if that's okay, because I was absolutely dreading going to see this movie.
I
You
know.
express that.
I expressed it many times over,
Oh, yeah.
and you just caught a bit of that. But for the most part, since probably like January, when all of the details about this film came out and we got an initial trailer, Nick and Toussaint were both very interested in seeing it and proclaiming, at least Nick was, that we were going to do an episode on this.
Absolutely.
To the dismay of me, is that
Yeah,
terrible.
I was gonna say that was more why I wanted to do an episode on it than even because I was gonna go see it no matter what.
Yeah,
Right.
But I was not a fan of Hereditary.
Yeah.
I mostly did not care at all for the last 30 minutes or so of it.
Yeah.
And I just was not a fan. Yeah. Even though there were parts of it that I liked. So I was going into this and saw that it was 2 hours and 20 minutes. And I was just going to be miserable. So that being said, we went to the theater. We went, the four of us, and Anna, who's been on many episodes before. We all got together and had a friendly evening and went to the theater. And I was pleasantly surprised by this film. And it doesn't mean it's like this amazing
cinematic masterpiece.
Oh, no, I was going to say, it's not...
we call them cinematic masterpieces.
Wow. How dare you?
I would say you're going for, like, the lowest of the low, but that's the huge, so it's all good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, this is not a film that's going to be like, hey, this makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside.
No.
No?
This is a pretty funny, dark comedy that has some really awful moments. When I say awful, I mean that they are gut-wrenching and excruciating, and at least made me uncomfortable in the theater. And it also has a very interesting rise towards the end of the film for our protagonist that we have throughout the entirety of the picture. And I would say thought-provoking is the other term I would use for this film that I thought... When I think of this, that is something that I think of. That this is a film that makes you think about shit, no matter what that is. I mean, this is a movie that in its first 10 minutes has Florence Pugh's sister commit suicide and take her parents along for the ride.
Yeah, murder-suicide.
And by, like, going deep, like...
Yeah.
Shutting off the doors, putting towels in every crevice throughout the entire house.
Oh, yeah.
And just because the sister wants to have the worst end of it, she has a hose going directly from one of the exhaust pipes directly into her mouth.
Right.
Can I just really quickly applaud the... I'm just saying.
Yeah.
But the ingenuity of her contraption. I mean, that's some mousetrap level shit.
I was going to say mousetrap too.
However, the actual physics of it is what got me.
All right, where's her microphone?
No, so weirdly enough, so my dad and I are we are those people that, like, when we saw...
Where is this going?
Hold on.
We actually did this exercise just to make sure.
So when we saw the movie...
Mythbusters, Midsommar edition.
Don't tell Mom, she'll find out. Jesus.
Wow.
He's back?
Back again.
So when my dad and I saw the movie Wanted...
Yeah.
The Angelina
Yes,
Jolie.
the Angelina
Did you
Jolie
practice
one.
curving bullets?
No.
Can you really drive a car over somebody else?
Sam
and
is
shoot
trying to
Right.
tell me about Wanted, the masterpiece.
You
Please,
mean
Sam.
Masterpiece?
Hey!
Um,
I'm sorry. Oh,
That's okay.
I'm sorry, Aster. That's like Ari Aster.
oh my god. Anyway, so my dad he's a military veteran.
Okay.
And he right away was the first, and he goes, "You can't curve a bullet like that. There's no possible way." So he and I constantly have, like, the sort of, like, is that physically possible? And I think while it was extremely dramatic to watch that murder-suicide, I couldn't help but keep pondering, how did she rip duct tape without her parents waking up? Like, that stuff is
drugged
loud.
them.
Like, well, that's a good point.
They had water on the
Or-
bedside table. You know, you just say, "Here, Mom."
seemed just a thought that she was very well planned for this, so she could have had the duct tape ready in the other room. I don't know. I'm just making it up.
Right. But some of the physics of that...
What if she had
Yeah.
scissors?
Like, yeah, that too.
Sam is somebody who goes to comic book conventions and ruins people's days.
I love doing that too.
Yeah. But that observation, though, should not take anything away from the drama that is that incredible panning, though, of that scene.
Can I just say, I've done in my own room, which is next door to my parents' room, far worse things and far louder things than rip duct tape. And they've never once confronted me about any of it. So
What's great about that?
at a certain point, maybe they did hear the duct tape, but they were just like, "Ha, that's our daughter."
See, what's great about that?
Oh my God!
Is that you could have said anything there.
Yeah.
It would have been
Yeah.
like, oh,
Oh,
That's incredible.
well. Also, to end that wonderful opening scene that is terrible, you have that, and we don't see the parallel at the end. Then, so we have no idea that this is going to take place. But you have Florence Pugh's character doing this extremely loud, audible moan cry in the lap of Jack Raynor's
it's
character.
on par with that of what was the actress, the lead actress, Toni Collette. Toni Collette's performance in Hereditary, and whatever you may say about that
Yes.
film, the elements of, and I don't mean to step on your toes in that, I think that those are comparable moments in two films that just so happen to have been written and filmed and released back to back.
All I'll
within the
say
course of 2
is
years.
I felt like the speakers next to me were vibrating
Oh, yeah.
from her scream.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And like that gut-wrenching audible reaction, like
Oh, yeah.
you don't get that. Like you get like the Marvel movie explosion and you hear the bass and it's just kind of like
Yeah.
out of sight, out of mind at this point.
Right.
Like you hear a woman screaming in agony
Yeah.
and that's making the bass
Tremble.
Vibrate?
Yeah.
It's super visceral.
Yeah.
dude. And then you
You literally feel it all over your body.
this incredible pan through the window where the snow outside like kind of looks both like snow and the shimmering sea in the middle of the summer. Like it was just a wonderful opening.
Yeah.
And then that led on to a very interesting film that I've got opinions on many different scenes and many different aspects of it. But I'll end my opening remarks by just saying that I think this is actually a pretty wonderful film that I'm looking forward to seeing again. I didn't necessarily need to see it in the theater again, but as soon as it comes out on home video, I'm going to be seeking it out, and I might actually purchase this.
You
And
might watch the 3-hour edition.
if there is one, the Zack Snyder cut. If there is one, I will probably be all over
Release it, cowards!
That was great. Did you see that? Did you see that?
The
Skywriting
yeah.
thing? Yeah.
Did I see it? I paid for it.
You don't even like that fucking movie.
No, but I like the internet. And I like what happens when we all come together.
Hey.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of other thoughts, but I will let someone else do the talking. But I'm a fan of Midsommar, and I look forward to hearing everyone else's thoughts. Sam,
Sure.
apparently you've been chosen to go next.
I have
We
been
always save our
chosen.
guests for last, and I feel like we shouldn't, in case we all say like the same thing over and over.
Right.
I want to repeat you instead of the other way around.
Okay.
Sure.
Sorry, Sam.
No, you're good. So I was excited for this one just because after seeing Hereditary, while I had very mixed feelings on it for the most part, I was floored by the acting performances, and I also admired the cinematic, I guess, not necessarily brilliance, but like artistic
Craftsmanship.
Yeah, that's a perfect word. Thank you. Craftsmanship of the film. So knowing that it was going to be Ari Aster's work, I got excited to see what else he can do, and if there's any sort of growth. I know we had talked about it on the Us episode, about how going from, Jordan Peele's first work to his second work, you saw some growth, but it needed more time.
Yeah.
And I think with how fast Astor's work was done and how like this process kind of occurred for this film, you can still see that there's growth that's occurring, which I really admired in some of the like really beautiful panning shots. The one, so I know we'd mentioned it in that opening scene of like the, and also the sound effects of it too, of seeing the cars in the garage, and then the camera it takes its time and it takes you through that whole adventure of going through the house to find them. Mm-hmm. And all the while you hear, and I thought it was very clever, the, string instruments that are replicating that same sound as sirens, and somehow that all fades into her cries, and it was really beautiful, and yet that sort of, like you had mentioned, that visceral feeling with hearing her.
Yeah.
And I think that's true for a lot of this film. There's a lot more to this than there was to Hereditary for me. There's a lot more of a visceral feeling that I connected with this film in weird but not so weird ways. And I really appreciated that there was some, there's some truth to the history of what, cultures have done in the past to try to keep their land their community well fed, their land, still yielding crops and things like that.
And even then there's even contemporary stories, like not true stories, but in the case of, what's the name? I can't remember the name of the author for life of me, but there's The Lottery.
Yes.
Yeah?
Shirley Jackson.
Shirley Jackson, yeah, sorry. I was going to say Mary Shelley, and I'm just like, no,
Jinx.
that's not. No, that's
You
not.
owe me a soda.
Yeah.
It's actually one of the ones that I thought of, too.
Right.
And I think I had mentioned that, too, at the theater as well.
Yeah. How people hew to superstitions.
Yes.
Through this idea of causation and correlation. Yeah.
And I think there's what I also appreciate about this, and one of the reasons why I liked it before I wrap it up is that I appreciate that there's these overlapping themes and these. I believe you had said it best, Alex, that it's very thought-provoking. Mm-hmm. Much like the other piece that he's done already, there's these common threads that you find, but the threads are frayed. So you can see all these different ideas and offshoots of it. And it's, honestly, I could not stop thinking about the film for probably a solid week after we'd seen it. Even to this day, even to now, a few weeks removed from it, I still think about it occasionally of certain, seeing certain scenes or just the way that maybe a camera angle would pan or things like that.
To go off of what you're saying, I have not stopped thinking about how fantastic this movie showed hallucinations.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Oh my gosh,
yeah.
yes.
This is probably the one recent film in recent memory that I feel like has really tapped into that psychotropic effect.
But makes it like there's a combination between what humans would see and what people want to see in the movie theater.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there were
The
so many.
breathing flower.
Oh, the breathing flower was
Yeah.
my favorite. As soon as I caught on to that, I was like,
Ooh,
that
that's
is a thing, and it kept doing it the whole time. It didn't just stop. It was just the way nature moved. When she's sitting on the chair and the leaves and vines start to slowly move around her body when
Yeah.
she moves. Oh man,
I'm looking
That's
forward
great.
to the making of for this film, if for nothing else than to know how they actually created that effect, because it was very uncanny and very weird. Yeah.
In a good way.
In a good way,
Yeah.
yeah, I liked it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Distinctive. You'll remember the film because of that.
Yes.
If nothing else, yeah.
And I think that's actually a nice way for me to wrap up my thoughts on this. It's very, it's something that sticks with you. And I think that's what I admire most about this film. Because while Hereditary kind of stuck with me, it also has left the recesses of my brain at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I'll get into that a little bit on my turn. Yeah.
Well, why don't you start off, Tucson, by giving us your initial thoughts on this?
Yeah, okay. So, just opening up is like I went to go see this film with Nick, Alex, Anna, and Sam for the second time. I actually went to go see it just the week before with my friend Adam, because he was like, "Hey, you always see films with those guys all the time." I was like, "I want to like watch a movie with you and like you like not know everything." I was like, "That's fair." I was like, so we decided to go to see this film, and I really enjoyed it the first time. We had a really great discussion after the fact, and leaving that film, I was even more excited to go see it with y'all, mostly because of Sam and Anna, because I'm a man, and I feel like this is really sort of the film that there's going to be perhaps a more, not so much a divergence, but nuanced interpretations between whether you are a man or a woman or otherwise, right? And I was really looking forward to Anna and Sam's take. So thank you so much, Sam, for coming on this episode.
Thanks for inviting me.
I enjoy this film overall a lot more than Hereditary, which I will like just say that I was curious to see this film because I wanted to see if it would follow in the pattern of what I felt with Hereditary, which was I went to go see that movie twice in theaters, and I felt like that was the most that I really needed to see that movie. I liked it in theaters, but I don't feel like I have to ever go back and rewatch it because I feel like I just got everything that I could out of that film from those two viewings. And I feel
Amen.
And it's not that I didn't like it. It's just it's not that deep, guys. It's really not. But I did really enjoy Midsommar, and I feel like to sort of a similar effect that I kind of feel this with this film, I'd be more keen to rewatch this than I would Midsommar on I would be more keen to watch Midsommar on home release than I would for Hereditary. Okay. I think that this is a very affecting breakup film. I think it's a very affecting breakup horror film. I think that it is fascinating, just the performances on display through Danny, played by Florence Pugh, and Jack Rayner, who plays Christian. By the end of it, I was just like, there's so many horrific things that happen over the course of this film, but really what really stuck out to me was just how shit of a boyfriend Christian is, and how manifest that, like his total inability to be a partner to his partner throughout the course of that entire film. Not only just that, he's just a shit person, and he just reveals that in so many different little microaggressions. Even in like the first scene when Danny calls him in order to like sort of like calm down from the whole concern about
that scene's great, by the way.
Because he's like, well, like this isn't the first time she does this. I mean, you always let her do this, and it's like it's really more of him sort of putting aside and dampening her own concerns, her own very valid concerns, because he's just tired of hearing it, and you just see the expression on her face as she sort of swallows her concern and just packs it,
tells him he's right,
packs it inside. I'm so lucky to have you. Like how her face just sort of transforms, and I was like, man, that really makes me sick.
Now that being said, what's great about that opening scene is we have no context of the previous actions of these characters.
No,
like not saying anything like about her character,
right?
But she could be somebody who just does this every single day about nothing,
right?
So, and we don't know that at the time.
But I will tell you though, and Anna and I both chatted about this, that in that opening sequence, essentially of watching how he treated her, and perhaps it has to deal with gender roles, as you spoke of. Yeah. She and I both agreed that we had that initial gut reaction of we don't like him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of there's something not okay about him in this relationship because he's not, like you said, being a true partner.
Yeah.
He's concern.
He's not entreating her, like, her concerns with weight or merit or respect. He might be a little bit annoyed by it, but it's really about just being there in the relationship, and he's just not. You can tell that he's just not emotionally present in that relationship. And then it just cuts to that next scene where he's like, "Dude, you gotta break up with her." And then you got like that dumbass like guy who looks like Sid from Toy Story, being like, "Oh man, we're gonna fuck those Swedish girls." And I'm just like, man, you are all just a bunch of awful motherfuckers.
Clearly, they were being scouted.
Yeah, they were just being and you know, however one might feel about Christian and Danny's relationship just from those two scenes, there's no way that I could look at that and think that I feel sympathy for that man in that sort of situation. I'm just like, if it's really that bad, then you should leave that relationship. And really, you only stayed in that relationship out of some idea of obligation, and that's and the way that he treats her like a burden is like it just really twists
makes your skin crawl.
And that was just from the first two scenes, and then when he actually gets the call from her after the bodies are discovered, and he's walking back to the apartment, and he's like trying to like hold her while she's just like viscerally sobbing. He looked like he was the kid that was called on at class, and he didn't actually like study. So it's like, oh shit, like he doesn't look like he's comforting his partner. He looks like he's fucking petting a cat who is just like about to like rip into his flesh if he doesn't do it right. He's like, sorry, I can't pantomime this on a podcast, but
you can't pantomime it regardless.
He looks so uncomfortable in that he would rather be anywhere but there for his partner, and then it just goes downhill from that point.
As the film wears on, it becomes very apparent that he is not a good partner
He's
whatsoever.
not. Yeah.
In addition, he's also just a bad person in general.
Yeah.
Because
dude, what the fuck?
Well, I mean, like
that sums it up.
like he was like and then he thought he was trying to do what was best for her without talking to his friends first, or shitty of people as they may be.
Right.
He's just kind of like, oh, by the way, and by the way, and by the way. It's
And
like,
by the way.
it feels like he probably does this a lot.
Yeah. Seems like he does this a lot.
Well, you can even see in their expressions too when that occurs of that.
Oh, here we go again.
Right, that they're not surprised, but at the same time you can see disappointment that it happened again.
Right.
And then he has probably the thing that annoys Toussaint the most, other than him being a shitty person, when he tries to steal somebody's work.
Yeah, trying to steal somebody's
piece of
scholarship.
shit.
I'm just like, dude, what the fuck? It's like, well, I didn't know that you were gonna be. Yes, you did, motherfucker. He literally talked about this right before they went on the trip, and just because he doesn't have any fucking like original ideas for himself, and I'm not gonna put this on blast, but like I remember after I was talking with somebody else, with a mutual friend, Sherry, about this film, and I'm just like, man, that guy kind of reminds me of the one guy from when we were in undergrad. That guy from undergrad would totally do that shit. Fuck that guy forever. Yeah, sorry, that was sort of an English major sort of like thing. Yeah, but like, yeah, we've met
Deep
people.
recesses of the past.
We've met people like that who are just the total shit stain of the earth, and like, yeah, fuck Christian. He is not a good scholar. Yeah. My other impressions about this film are that I love what we talked about before, the psychotropic effects. It felt like some weird Boschian take on like Google Deep Dream somehow committed to cinematography, and I just don't know how they achieved that, but it was really, really cool. One thing that I prefer about this film to Hereditary is the fact that it's not focused on supernatural shit, at least explicitly. There's not a lot of supernatural shit in this. It's more of like psychotropic and more like mortal pagan sort of like rituals without like the intervention of a malicious like outer worldly force like in Hereditary, because I feel like for me that's just sort of like diffused what was actually legitimately scary about this, in that it's about these two respective films. When you stack them up together, what's interesting about them as horror films is that they are totally antithetical to what we are usually come to expect from more mainstream horror films, and where it's like a roller coaster ride that goes up and down and up and down. Whoa, here's a crescendo. Here's the really scary part. It's like, but really, honestly, the film as a horror film starts with probably both of those films start with the most visceral and affecting and terrifying and intimate type of horror situation, which is losing a loved one or losing your family in the most barbaric way possible. And then just sort of having to cope through the motions of like losing that, all the while being ensnared in the machinations of something greater than yourself when you are at arguably your most vulnerable moment. Yeah. And I think that is what I take away from these films, and I think that they're so interesting. And I think that removing the sort of element of supernatural shit in Midsommar really like it punctuates what is so horrifying about the situation, in that effectively Danny Christian was such a shit boyfriend, and Danny was so vulnerable that she eventually finds herself falling into sort of she finds herself enamored into the collective of what is essentially a pagan cult, because as horrifying as the pagan cult is, how alien their customs are, somehow they're able to project more warmth and more concern and more consideration and comfort for her in her time of need than someone that she's been in a relationship with for years. Years, mind you, that he has forgotten how many years they have actually been together. So it's just all these little fucking microaggressions. Also, this film is fucking hilarious. I'm sorry to like I'm trying to like get all of my thoughts off of this, but honestly, one of the films that this has been compared to is the original Wicker Man, which I still maintain is like one of my favorite horror films of all time, and I can't believe that the shitty remake with Nicolas Cage is all but dwarfed in the cultural consciousness.
That's funny for different reasons.
You know, it's a fucking meme movie, and I'm just like, no, but like the original Wicker Man is actually a very well put together horror movie that skirts on moments of comedy and not in a laugh out loud way. I'm just like, what the fuck? Where I just don't know I don't know how to get my footing, and I felt like this with this film as well, because I think that there are actually legitimately funny moments, like with William
Jackson.
Yeah,
Harper.
No.
Yeah, his character, where when they first get to the actual Midsommar grounds and they're looking at like the like one of the stones or whatever. It's like, oh yeah, what language is this? This is Elder Plutarch, right? It's like, no, this is younger Plutarch, and he just hangs his head. I'm just like, yeah, you've just spent like I don't know how many years in your post like grad like thing just like studying this shit, and that was one of the moments that I was just like, oh man, it was like just little like nudges.
If we want to talk about comedy with this film, it really helps to have a good audience, and I think Nick picked up on this. I mean, I think everybody did, but one of the first things we talked about afterwards is that we saw it with a number of people in the theater with us and people who were into what this film was doing.
Right, yeah.
And the sex scene that happens late in this film.
Holy shit.
I feel like people were like really laughing.
Oh, yeah.
Not like cracking up laughing, but also like they were on this film's wavelength.
Like, what the fuck is going on?
It is so ridiculous that you just kind of have to laugh at it.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you have a bunch of just older naked women
just watching this dude.
And this dude
going
is
at it.
stoned.
Be a cheerleader.
I'm guessing he's probably been slipped some sort of Viagra in the thing as well. He just walks in, goes into the 15-year-old girl or whoever else she's supposed to be.
At some point, the old woman just goes behind him and starts pushing his buttocks as if to milk the prostate. Like, what the fuck is going on?
Well,
I know, Nick.
Wasn't quite milking the prostate.
I know.
But that's okay.
Do we need to have a talk?
No, we don't. We don't need to have a talk. Okay.
I mean, the other woman who appears might be this girl's actual mother, like, is getting up and like feeling around him, and then she's feeling her hair, and it's just
this is what milking the prostate.
I don't
Oh,
know.
Jesus.
Oh God.
Oh, Nick.
Yeah.
Thank God this is audio only.
Don't worry, we'll post links.
Oh God.
No, we don't do social media very well.
Okay.
We talk a big game, but no, there are lots of other scenes that's probably like the easiest one to remember. But there are lots of other scenes, like you say, Toussaint, that are quite funny.
Yeah. At least, like, going off of the humor part, I remember the first time watching this film in the theater and just, like, reacting to the finale when it shows her face. And as soon as it cut to black, I couldn't help but just say, "You go, girl." And, like, the people next to me started laughing. I'm just like, what? I don't think she was totally in the wrong for the shit that happened. As fucked up as that sounds.
I think I admire the woman that sat to the left of you.
Yeah.
And how, so after that ending happened,
Yeah.
and you were like, "You go, girl."
Yeah.
And the woman very loudly goes, "Is that it?
Yeah.
Is that the end?"
Yeah.
Like, and she's like, "Really?"
Yeah, it's like, I'm gonna call my son. He told me I had to see this film. One last thing that I want to sort of like leave on and then move on to Nick is that I feel like a recurrent. When you look at these two films back to back, you can see that a lot of the same tropes and the same beats sort of repeat themselves if rearranged in different ways, and that's fine, that's cool. But I also think that since Ari Aster has said that after this he might like take a break from horror, I think that might be for the best.
Said he wanted to do some sort of comedy.
Yeah, he wanted to do something, and I think he would probably be very good at comedy coming off of like this film. I think that he's capable of that. And besides,
it wouldn't be like in
horror,
old school comedy.
Horror and comedy are like adjacent on the same wavelength in some respects when it comes to like how they are set up.
Tension release.
Tension release and like how they're set up.
Milking the prostate.
Yeah. Okay. Milking the prostate of the cinematic anticipation. Anyway.
MTP.
One thing that I think that he keeps on coming back to is sort of symmetry, like how he lays out scenes. Like that's something that's very recurrent in a lot of things. And it's nice when the sets are set up, when the mise en scène is pretty well, but I think that it's a little bit rote. He just keeps on coming back to it. Also, he has this sort of predilection for using naked bodies cast in silhouettes as sort of like punctuating moments of horror. I mentioned that before in our Hereditary episode, and I feel like that is also apparent in this film as well. And it's like, and as soon as I saw that, I immediately thought of like that scene in Hereditary, and I'm just like, keeps on coming back to those naked bodies, man, just casting silhouettes, and I'm just like, and I think it's effective, but at the same time, it just feels like, oh, well, I've already seen that trick before, so yeah, so. I think this is a good film. I enjoy it more than Hereditary, and I'm looking forward to what he comes out next that is not horror related, because I really want to see what else he's got in store for us. Nick.
Yeah. Well, actually, I will start off really quickly as a almost rebuttal to
That's fine.
one thing, which is the idea of the repeated trick of the naked bodies. If anything, I feel like his movies skew more towards the kind of art house Euro horror of like the 70s, in which some international artists like Jess Franco, a Spanish filmmaker, not Euro, but he was influenced by it,
right.
And John Rollin, a French horror filmmaker, they kind of ooze sexuality into their filmmaking to the point where so many gothic stories that they would tell, they just, like, part of it was for sexploitation reason, but another part of it was because, like, why even go through the motions of finding a costume if it's probably more off-putting to take the same scene and basically to dress it down to its bare essence, which is the taboo image, which is funny because it's technically what we're born with. And
I don't know if it's necessarily like bathed in sexuality.
No, I'm not saying this one is,
yeah.
but it harkens back, I would say, to a time in which I would say nude bodies were slightly more acceptable, whether it's because it's abroad or B, it's from an era in which we discovered that we could put sex in bodies into movies, so we put a lot of them, if not too many of them,
right.
in everything, whereas now we're a little more conservative, at least in our continent, as to when and how. Like, now we can only do it if it's an R-rated gross-out comedy because ha ha ha, he he he.
Or a horror film that sort of plays off the, like, how uncomfortable people feel with naked bodies in general when it comes to...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So, I very much enjoyed this movie. Had a lot of fun with it. I was a fan of Hereditary and still am. I think the idea that it's a shallow well is, you can say about any movie you can get everything you can out of a movie after so many viewings, but that's not true of anything, even if the movie sucks. So I hesitate to think that just because its ending wraps up that movie with a resolution that is starkly literal, that there's still not depths of its psychological profile. But I digress, because we all talked about Hereditary, so that was my comment about Hereditary. Yeah. Midsommar, though, I definitely think is a step forward for Aster as a filmmaker, and I was very excited to see it, and it did not disappoint whatsoever. I thought it was hilarious. I thought, as a black comedy, it was genuinely funny, both in extremely purposeful ways, like having Will Poulter just say a few lines in the background of every scene, and I genuinely liked that he was never really foregrounded, except for maybe in 2 scenes that I can think of, and both scenes were...
Hey guys, she's I'm gonna go. She's gonna show me, what? What is she gonna show you? Do you care? It's like, nah, I don't really care.
I was going to say the scene where they first take the shrooms or the acid or whatever, and they're all on the prairie, and he just wants them all to lie down. He's like, can you lie down? You're freaking me out. We all need to be lying down. That, and when he pissed on the dead living tree of whatever.
The ancestral tree.
Yeah, the ancestral tree. Which
he was dead from that. Well, actually,
it just moved things along.
That's a good...
It really did.
Yeah. Well, I'll get back to that later.
Yeah, and what I liked about that was that because that didn't actually seem like a out of place scene. Like I could see even a good American foreigner looking out at this open land, seeing nothing that you can really hide behind, and then just seeing what looks like a dead tree out where no one else is. So why wouldn't you go over there, go behind it, and then take a piss?
When you're talking about his best lines, the line that I you reacted to the most, well, maybe not the most, but you did really enjoy, is he was not present during the suicide scene, and he was very disappointed that he missed that.
Oh man, you let me sleep through that? When
everyone else who is not a native to this group was not feeling it.
Yeah. And, I'm starting to come around as to how I feel about Ari Aster as a filmmaker, which is that I've come to the realization that for me, Ari Aster is my personal version, and maybe a specific, let's say my horror version, of other people's Inarritu, which is that I don't give a shit what Ari Aster says in publicity about his movies, because the idea that this is a breakup movie, while is technically sound, I'm not disputing his vision and what he claims this to be. I just find that to be one of the least interesting lens to look at this movie, because in my opinion, the Florence Pugh's character of what's her Danny.
Yeah. Couldn't even remember her
I
name.
know, right?
Yeah, I couldn't either.
You're
it's
just
been
like
3 weeks.
Christian.
We were supposed to do this episode. I mean, not in a bad way, but normally we do so anyway.
Yeah.
Well,
making me feel bad.
Well, people started attacking me, Sam. But to call this a breakup movie, I just think that takes one of the more interesting aspects of Danny's character, and it too much tethers her character and her character's arc to the male who is funny to have around, because there is a lot of, I would say, kind of dark humor to mine from just how pathetic he is as a partner and as a boyfriend and an emotional, codependent person. But I don't think her story is necessarily dependent on him the way she thinks it is. And so the idea that this was, quote-unquote, in Aster's words, that this was a breakup film and the horror version of it, it's just, I personally thought this was more of a tale of, as we've said the word, but of self-identity and having an identity crisis, because to exist in your own world is fucking hard enough without having to deal with other people, and yet to live in this world that it comes with the price of admission. And so for her to start this journey...
Is that Sartre? Are you quoting Sartre?
No, not that I know of.
I'm sorry.
I thought you said Star Trek for a moment.
No,
I was like, what?
No, I'm sorry.
But no, then you said, okay.
I thought it was...
That makes more sense than
it
Star
sounded,
Trek.
Be good to hear Picard talk about the price of admission.
A very...
it's a good thing these characters didn't get engaged.
It was a very existentialist sort of like sentiment that you sort of like put across.
I didn't know it, so
Picard says engage every time the ship takes off.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Shows you how much I watch. Is that the Next Generation?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Woo.
Yeah.
Got that right.
Well, if you haven't watched it, make it so.
That's another quote.
Anyway.
Thank you.
I think he got that one, even though he wouldn't actually identify it.
That's fine. Yeah.
But I find Danny's journey to be fulfilling in an insular way that's interesting and fascinating and heartbreaking, I would say, in spite of a character like Christian. And it's not to say that he serves no purpose or anything like that in the movie, but I think it almost downplays her agency to say that this is a breakup movie, as if her choice at the end is only important in the context of getting rid of a Christian. And I don't think it all comes down to, oh, she hates this man.
No, it's not.
Therefore, she's a spiteful bitch. Like, that's what I kind of hear when I hear Ari Aster talk about this movie. I'm not saying that's... And if anyone subscribes to the idea that this is a breakup film, I'm not saying that everyone else is pushing that as a message. But I think when he talks about it, it just sounds like he's like a high school kid kind of giggling.
This is like a jilted boyfriend sort of like... It sounds... Yeah.
Like she got to have her Carrie moment, but...
this is a lot more complicated than just that. It's also about, I'll let you and
Thank you very much.
Yes, please. Yeah.
And so, as for me, her journey is, as I said, one of self-identity crises and whatnot. And so, for her to start this journey, just heartbreakingly tethered to her family, who she loves, and for presumably good reason. We have no real reason to believe that even her sister, with obvious problems or whatever, that any one of the three has anything but love for her sister or for her. And so for her to lose part of her identity, because family and friends end up becoming part of who you are because of just through osmosis, or emotional osmosis, whatever. Osmosis Jones, who knows?
What was going on a microscopic level during all this shit?
We're going to get to that. So for this journey to start with her heartbreakingly losing a huge part of her identity that was good for her, and for her to latch on to the worst parts of her emotional codependency in her life with that of Christian, and for that to mirror each other, but one's being a tragic fate thrusted upon her, and the ending being a choice she gets to make. It becomes this weird funhouse mirror of each other of events, because it starts with the three of them dying through carbon monoxide poisoning, but she gets to essentially make the choice to allow Christian to die and everybody else in that house of smoke inhalation. And it's kind of the two sides of the same coin. And here, she, like, I think at this point, it's kind of, this is the last thing that's holding her back from actually, becoming a fully realized person in her eyes. Now, the tragedy of the story is that she is only doing this in service of a cult and an organization that will strip away any semblance of identity from her. But that is more comforting to her at this point because of the culmination of events that have happened and interactions that she has engaged with, that she doesn't see that there is a way to move forward outside of just giving in. And I just think that that's what's powerful about that finale, and that I think my favorite scene, and then I'll pass it off, and where the crux of the movie is for me, is that we another parallel is that we had talked about earlier about after the three family members die, and Christian comes over to console her in his way, and her, moaning cry is very gut-wrenching and hard to watch, and, he just sits there silently, not doing much of anything.
Right.
And for her to find this creepy cult, like, nothing that this cult has done including letting people, elderly, whatever people, fall to their death, and then finishing them off if they don't die.
I was going to say,
With a big, oversized Acme hammer.
I was going to say, that whole thing's bullshit when they pull out Mjolnir, or whatever the fuck Thor's hammer is called.
Mjolnir, yeah.
And then just someone
You remembered.
I try. I've seen all of them now at this point, so it's made its way in. No, I mean it looks like a fucking carnival game where they're just bing, bing,
And-
But I think that's part of the humor of it too. At
Oh,
the same
absolutely.
time,
It is, but it takes away from their argument of it being this spiritual thing that people die when they're 70. Like, no, you had somebody smack them with a hammer.
Yeah, it's like
Just trying to facilitate the spiritual experience.
yeah, it's like
Probably could have done it a little more.
it's like
elegant way.
Harakiri. It's like Harakiri, where the samurai has to basically like cut open his own guts and stuff, and he's not.
Yeah.
If they're not able to like do it properly, then
there are people assigned to finish it for them,
Right.
just in case it goes south, or in case they chicken out or whatever.
right. That's pretty
Yeah.
much the same equivalent.
Yeah, no, and it's a different countries, tradition.
But it's interesting that there's a confluence of just that same sort of the same sort of ideas when it comes to like ritualistic suicide.
Yeah.
This is really random.
Okay.
If I can just sneak this in real
Sure.
quick. During the final scene, when the people who've been chosen, some of them are dead already, are being burned in the House of Horrors, and the entire community is screaming out as if they are feeling the burning, which obviously they are not.
Yeah.
I don't know why, and I just kept giggling to myself because I kept thinking of Florence Pugh being like Lucy when she's "No, Ricky." I don't know why.
I thought that the scene that has her just sort of, like moving in her floral gown.
Oh, it looks ridiculous.
She's just
Yeah.
she's just struggling against the weight of it
Yeah.
while the building is like burning in the background. She's just like sobbing just because she's trying to exert all of this force while like moving herself around and also just like coping with like grief and just like sort of like the cathartic sort of
That smile at the end,
screaming,
though.
cry.
Yeah.
I want to
legit.
I want to talk a little bit about that because I want to ask Sam about that because we.
Can I really quickly
Sorry, man.
finish?
Sorry.
Yeah. I was just like halfway through. So
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
a thought at least.
Come back to the
Sorry, just so
Yeah.
that way I don't forget.
No problem.
My bad.
The parallel between her being very horribly consoled by her horrible boyfriend, Christian, just in dead silence as she does that, so that where she would ignore everything that this cult has done up until this point, including ritualistic suicide, if not accomplice the murder to help it speed it along, and for her to find solace in the scene in which she is in that. I believe it's after she.
She's in like a barn. Or
Yeah, she's in the barn, and
yeah.
she's. I believe it's after she discovers that Christian was, not even taken. She just knows that Christian is having sex
Yes.
with that other woman.
Context doesn't matter.
Yeah,
either.
no, but she gets to see that that's a thing, and for her to then do that wailing cry again, only this time everybody who is present, and I think it's certainly interesting that it's all females, because I believe that she's mistaking this as a false sense of feminine strength and whatnot, because then they all start to mimic her wailing, and it dwarfs her own identity to the point where she would rather lose herself and find comfort in the fact that her pain now doesn't even matter because it doesn't belong to her anymore. Everybody gets to share this, which is such a horrible way to actually process trauma, because
it's equally validating and invalidating for the fact that. Again, I'm sorry to I'm sorry. It's like it's validating and invalidating for the fact that it's validating for the fact that it sort of entreats that pain as a weight that is too much for one person to carry, and so these people are meant to be sort of like midwives and like helping to carry that pain, and it's invalidating because her pain is not her own. Who she is not her own. She is part of a collective. She is not a singular person. I'm sorry to step on your toes again. Sorry, yeah.
So, yeah, I'm done.
Sorry.
I've got nothing left.
Okay.
Tucson, you were going to ask something of Sam.
Yes. We were talking about this shortly before we recording, but you were talking about the reaction to the ending for Midsommar and how you had talked about it with some other people. Yeah. And what was about that?
So to kind of, I guess, to kick it off, I had not heard the claim that Aster said that this was like a breakup film, and hearing that, it's not that I disagree with it, but I don't necessarily fully support it. I think there's a lot of those dynamics within this film for sure, but I don't think that's the overall arc at all. However, I think the relationship that Christian and Danny have, it certainly is tested in this. And that sort of, like I'd mentioned earlier with how right away I didn't like Christian.
Yeah.
With no prior context to his character at all. Granted, that could be fast judgment call and so on and so forth. But there's that sort of intuition that you have of like there's just
know.
Yes, that especially and I know I mentioned this previously too, that at some point or another, someone, whether you're male, female, or otherwise, you've encountered a relationship like this before, where you've had an unsupportive partner, and so it's been one of those things where you know exactly how she feels, but you also feel that sense of, I need to get out, but you don't know how to get out because there is emotional dependency. So the fact that in the very end it's a forced break, and that it's in the most physical sense an absolute, like, there's no chance of this ever occurring again, is super, like, it hits the core a little bit more. And I find it very, I'm trying to think of the right word for it. Sort of relieving.
Cathartic?
Yeah, cathartic. And I know oftentimes flames and fire is used as a form of cleansing, just as water is too, that like duality and that irony. But that sort of, and I very much felt the same way as Florence's character, of that sort of, you're grieving for a loss that, you know, you wanted to exist, but it never truly existed. And I think that's what made that ending a little bit more powerful, and that smile at the very end a little bit more enchanting, if you will. I don't think that's the right word, but we're going with it. Yeah.
I feel like there's so many different ways you could go with her reaction at the end.
Yes, and I think that's kind of why I like it. It's that sort of, you can't really tell what the smile is for, and
I just thought
the
she
depth of it.
She farted.
That's one way
that
of
is
it,
one
too.
direction you could go.
Florence P.U.
I mean, I think probably one of the most obvious is that she's happy that he's gone.
Yeah.
Or that she's been fully indoctrinated into sort of this idea, and that she's subscribed to sort of this.
I mean,
now everything, this avatar of awfulness has been destroyed. Now even the weight that she feels is kind of lifted from her.
And I mean, to go off of what Sam was talking about, this idea of even like cleansing this black spot away from her being, is that leading to her, you know, smiling for? I mean, it's well played and well done by her too. I mean, just it's not like she has a creepy Joker smile. Like, it's a very like subtle. Oh yeah.
I very much enjoy her performance, and for as much as I guess the way I'll phrase it is, I don't want to have to compare this to Hereditary constantly.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
I can't help
it because she is very reminiscent of, I can't remember her name.
Toni Collette?
Yes. Of her character, and that sort of, there's such depth to the emotions that they portray. And there's, especially in that, I mean, overall, once Danny becomes the May Queen, there's a lot that you sort of see her gaining self-confidence in a weird way. It's unfortunate that it takes a cult and the
putting on
dancing
putting
other
on a
people.
charade,
facilitator.
by the way,
Yes.
to have her be the May Queen.
Yes.
Yeah.
That. Oh yeah, I definitely felt that.
Oh yeah.
And it's very telling that at the same time that's what it takes for her to have enough to help build up her self-confidence at the end to finally say, yes, I don't want to be with him anymore in the broadest sense possible.
But did she actually think that, or is she just now part of the group that is like, oh, we need to kill him because the crops?
Which is a solid question. I do have to say, though, that it was between him and another person. So it's not necessarily that it was solely him and they kind of picked him out. And
there's something to be said about the fact that she can project horrible shit onto him because of their relationship in and of itself. And yet
he's just some random guy who got selected through an actual lottery
right.
where they had
Right.
a machine.
So how is that
with
fair
balls
to
come out.
him
Yeah.
when
No,
you can?
yeah.
No, I'm just saying. So when you can look at as a first person as Christian and be like, well, I can name things that you've done that are wrong, and it's that kind of horrible sense of morality that only comes from a very biased first person's perspective.
Also, too, to combine it with the Wicker Man, and this is a really silly reference, but he's wearing a bear suit when he gets burned alive.
Oh
which
no,
I thought was
absolutely.
fantastic.
I thought was a direct. I mean, there was that kind of throughout the whole movie. One of the bed sheets was the Shining's carpet.
Yeah, no, there were a lot
for
of
no real reason.
I brought up the Wicker Man as soon as we left the theater, but there were lots of references throughout the entirety of the film, so that was probably just the easiest one to tease out.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Which,
Yeah,
to
but
me-
and this.
Yeah,
oh,
go ahead.
what were you gonna say?
Oh, I was just going to say that bear scene where they throw the bear on the table. And you initially,
Did I see, by the way, there's a bear action figure now?
Yeah,
Was
that's
that-
a
was
little
that-
joke thing.
Was that a spoof? Okay.
Yeah.
No, it's a real thing.
Okay.
Is it a real thing that they're selling?
I think it's a limited thing, but yeah.
Really?
Yeah. That bear in a cage
Bear in
is
a
an
cage.
action figure.
Yeah, it's a
You don't
bear.
think film nerds
It's
are
a bear.
Are
It's
gonna
a bear.
buy that?
Oh, that's the same thing that they did for the promotion for Hereditary, where they had the little dolls that Charlie created, and they
Sorry that I cut you off.
no,
Sam,
you're
but-
good.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
But that little scene of Christian being wheeled in, and that sort of they just show you the table and then you see the bear and everything. I definitely thought he was going to be thrown onto the table and just gutted in front of us.
Yeah.
So when I saw that it was a bear instead, I was
Whew, this is
I
a
was
lot more bearable.
Wait,
The bare necessities, the simple bare necessities.
That's where you went with that?
Let's burn this man in a pyre.
what a twist!
Wow, this is turning into... I don't even want to say, but it's...
But yes,
yeah.
to what
Please
you were going to
continue.
say.
Oh boy.
I don't know where to go from
Prior
that.
to the bears.
What was I gonna say? I forgot at this point.
We're talking about
I'm
the
sorry.
bear. We're talking about
I think it was
Jack.
just before
Jack
the bear.
Rayner. Okay.
Oh,
Yes.
comparing this to Hereditary, though, it's not even that it's a lady thing, because this movie begs to be compared to Hereditary, not just by the virtue of being made by the same person, but made by the same person who clearly has, between two films, the same fascinations, which is following a female protagonist who is consumed by grief, and the rabbit hole of unraveling a exterior community and or possible conspiracy that kind of supersedes her own grief, either out of just necessity or ignorance or whatever. And yet, both of them, they ended up being a flip side of each other, because if Heredity ends with Toni Collette's character being consumed by that thread and becoming the victim, as she literally finds herself in that little wooden house there, Florence Pugh's character is able to make the choice to flip it, and when she gets to the end of where this goes, decides that she would rather live a hollow life.
Did she make the choice to not be inside, or was she rather just sort of pushed into the
she's
position
not
where
screaming at the end.
I know.
I'm not saying she I'm comparing the two. It's not so much as look at the text and that's the interpretation of it, so much as trying to say that it becomes this mirrored version of a character succumbing to deciding to live with this because you're either inside or you're outside type thing. And,
you're either in the bear cage or you're out of the bear cage.
So, but yeah, there's a lot of similarities there.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah, definitely,
for sure. So, what about sort of the early parts of this film where everyone's trying to play it on everything is on the up and up? Because I think that's one of the more fascinating parts of this film to me, because obviously after we get halfway, the tables turn and it becomes clear what's going on here for the most part. And then all the explanations of no, there was only room for one person in that car. It's just like, no, there wasn't.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we have the early on when it's fun for the first time viewing because I think most people had a pretty good idea what was going to be happening in this film. But at the same time, we see all of their fun happenings with drugs early on and all of their loving welcomes and all the things that definitely feel bizarre but are disguised by the fact that this is a different culture and we should be embracing this. And all of a sudden you're just getting sucked into this world that both as a film viewer and as the characters on the screen are just trying to understand. And then when you're too far in and you start seeing people dying, it's like, I guess this is okay.
So I had a conversation with a friend, more of a debate, an impromptu debate with a friend.
More of a fight
about this film with a friend, and I wanted to ask sort of your impression about this. So Christian and his two friends who were brought by Pele and Pele's brother Igmar, who brought the other two people. The people who were the outsiders that were brought to this Midsommar Fest, they were already supposed to be sacrificed.
Oh yeah, they're fucked
as part of this before whatever they did respectively, right?
Sure.
There was just going to be a reason to kill them off. Whether it's Will Porter's Sid character who decides to pee on the ancestral tree and just make a total ass of himself. And
reading the sacred text or taking photos of it or whatever.
Reading the sacred text or
I'll say this.
Or just being chosen by the May Queen.
He was told not to do that.
Yeah.
I'll say this. I would say, while I pretty much can see that, I would say it's 50-50 in the sense that I think this cult would genuinely welcome anybody into it.
It just so happened that they needed somebody for this.
Yeah, they are here. They can be sacrificial lambs, but I would think that if any one of those four, including her, got really into it, they're not going to be like, oh, well, we have to sacrifice you. Sorry, because I actually take the dance contest to be. I'm not saying it's not rigged in a sense, but she could have fell down at any point. So I don't think that it just becomes this. She doesn't realize that the strength. I would say the Machiavellian mind of maybe them taking Christian, having him, have sex with that girl, having her to see it. I'm not saying that they weren't inching towards that or trying to push it, but I think they are pretty much game for whatever fucked up scenario happened, whether it's her getting so mad that she decides
but
to
they are
join
definitely stacking the deck.
Yeah,
so, the contention that my friend had, one of the less dumb contentions I think he had on this. We got it. We got into it. And one that I sort of want to unpack here is that the way that the film sort of frames the reason why these people died. There's two conflicting messages. They were already going to be brought here to die, right? Mm-hmm. But then sort of the film is following these three core guys who seem to just be hoisted by their own petard in such a way, and they are undone by their own foibles or whatever like that. But then there's the two other people who didn't have fucking shit to do.
Well, they're not the main characters, so we don't technically know. No, I mean,
we don't know what
they could have done something.
They
stupid.
could have done something,
For example,
but we don't.
They were the two most vocal against the ritual suicide.
Yeah.
So that's their foible?
Well, if they want to leave, yeah.
Okay.
None of the other three indicated that they wanted to go outside and bring people in to stop this shit.
In fact, they seemed more interested.
Right. Yeah. So I would say that would be the most. I would say.
So the reason why they died was more to sort of contain the insularity of.
They were always going to die. They could have all they could have all spoken out on
I
it.
agree
What I
with your friend.
What I think it is that the criticism is that if they are already going to die, and the film frames it as though these characters are being undone by their own hubris
I agree.
or their own sort
There's
of.
two things happening at the same time,
Yeah.
and they kind of cancel each other out, which
Yeah.
is that either A, this is following the Willy Wonka factory rules, which is that
Yeah.
everybody is either their own worst enemy
Ari Aster has even
breaking,
said that
yeah,
this was like
in breaking
this
the rules.
It's Willy Wonka or Wizard of Oz for perverts or some shit like that. And I'm just like, I guess I see that. Yeah.
Or it's just preordained, in which if that doesn't matter, then why should we as the viewers care about the tension between them making these mistakes
Right,
and
right,
whatnot?
right.
So I agree that there's a mixed message there.
Right, yeah.
And it could have picked a lane, basically.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, that's one of the ones that I will concede on that part. Yeah, I do like this film. I think that there are some parts that kind of grate on me in hindsight, in the same way that it sort of grated on me for Hereditary. But overall, I think that as a whole, I do enjoy this film.
Yeah, how about that tapestry?
The tapestries are great. Yeah.
Was it great? That's
think-
fucked up.
I think the tapestries perform the same function as the dioramas in Hereditary, where they sort of hearken to events that are happening or are going to happen.
Which only suggests that the movie leans towards the preordained aspect, which makes the idea that that these, like, those scenes, like where he reads the book or whatever, and they're outraged. It's almost too performative in nature,
Right? Are they
on their part.
Are they performing outrage?
But it is too perform. I mean, the whole film is like the description of the guy continuously saying, "No, there's only one seat in the truck.
Yeah.
There's only one seat in the truck."
Right.
Like, for us as the viewer, this whole thing seems ridiculous. Like, it seems like bullshit. But yet she's still, like, just trying to understand what this guy's fucking saying.
Yeah.
Because she's in the moment.
One great thing about this movie, I will say, one great scene, I should say, is that I've never seen a movie completely get away with, I would say, subliminally. Not because it's so subconscious that you can't notice it. Like, obviously it's there. But the movie never actually goes out of its way to suggest that it's something that will happen. And I'm building this up, but that an entire audience would think that something is definitely going to happen, and for the film to not even broach it, which is the scene in which the woman in the bed charges towards the baby, and I believe everybody in the theater thought that, like, she was going to grab a knife and stab a baby.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And for it to not even, like, it's not like then the music swells up, and then she stands over it, and then just like, oh no, whatever. Like, that she was not actually doing that the entire time. She was doing something else. But I thought that was pretty great.
Well, that was also great because of the, I think, the different motivations that character has that the audience really could not have known at that time, where she's just annoyed.
But we're
because she
already that much on the offensive, or I should say the defensive, of what we think.
I mean, the film's tone is set from
I know the tone
first
is,
scene.
but I don't think I don't think at that point we had seen even the ritual sacrifice yet. So
Maybe not. But at the same time, I feel like after the first scene, like, I thought this film would have killed a baby.
No, I mean,
wouldn't be
if not that
surprised.
it would be out of place in the film. Just
Okay.
for characters we haven't, we don't know yet as far as whatever. The one thing I'll say that I also did not care for, or I should just say a minor quibble, is that William Jackson Harper's character. So there's the moment before the ritual, the day before the ritual sacrifice scene, or the ritual suicide scene. The Swedish dude that brought them all mentioned that there's going to be and he says whatever foreign word, and no one knows what it means.
But he does. He's like, "Are you serious? We're gonna have like a real one?" And then
which makes no sense,
right?
Because the next day he's somehow horrified and taken aback by what he sees.
Because I think that he was
I think he may have thought it was going to be a different outcome than a human.
He knew what it was, but he did not know to what extent would it really be that.
I mean, could it just? And I don't know.
Yeah.
Could it just mean like a sacrifice? Like they're
that's why I want to know what that word means. But he made it sound like he knew what it was, and he was like super into it academically. And I'm not saying that when you see something like that, then you might not have a visceral reaction. But he genuinely acted as if. I mean, the people stand on that cliff for like whole minutes before they jump. So for him to be like,
no, I think it wasn't so much that. It's like he is academically interested in this. That's the reason why he went on this trip in the first place. It's like, you read about something for your entire career, but you never think you're actually going to see it. And then when
he was told he was going to see it.
But yeah, but then
literally, and he asked for clarification.
Yeah, for clarification. But remember that it wasn't actually like wholly clarified. And then he actually sees it. It's like saying that you're going to see something.
But when his colleague asked, "What is it?" And if he knows it's a ritual suicide, so then he's going to be like, you'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, he's just kind of
I think
that was kind of a dick move on his part.
I don't think he could have known it was a suicide, human suicide.
Yeah.
Though. If he does, then then okay.
Suicide. It's a suicide.
Perhaps what it might be is that you can prep all you want and say that I'm fine with blood and guts and everything, and I can watch a human sacrifice before my eyes. But it could have been his response in that moment could be that he's never seen anything like this before.
Yeah.
And that could just be, even though, so I think a good example would be like Aztec sacrifice. You know that clearly these people would literally be like, yep, I'm all for it, and they'd have their hearts ripped out right on a table, on a stone table in front of tons of crowds and everything like that. And you and I think it kind of touches to what Toussaint was mentioning about, as an academic, everything is very ethereal. It's very
theoretical.
Yes,
yeah.
It's up here. It's not tangible.
It's the life of the mind.
Yeah. And so
Toussaint, you're an academic, right? Tomorrow, I'm going to a ritual suicide.
Well, I don't study that.
Would you like to join me?
Boy.
Well, I mean, see, that's
Say
the,
no.
here's
You've never seen one before.
here's the thing.
You've never seen one before.
Here's
though.
the thing.
So you don't know if you don't like it, right?
This doesn't actually map one-to-one with that sort of situation, because even if I were, say, an academic, that is actually not my field. So I'm not really I'm
being a real fucking nerd about this.
I'm sorry. I'm being a really fucking nerd about this. I guess it's because I'm a
He's
fucking
trying to clarify.
because I'm a fucking scholar. I guess.
Ooh, that's higher than an academic.
I know, right?
I appreciate it.
So
yeah,
another part of this though is we see another version of this later in the film, where we have the two members of this society that have decided that they are going to sacrifice themselves and put themselves into the burning house.
Yeah.
And they take the whatever home remedy medicine that will make them not feel it. And as soon as they start getting burning, they want to get the fuck out of there because they're being burnt to death while they're living.
Yeah.
And I think that was another good aspect of that, of somebody being like, yes, I am going to kill myself for the greater good. And then fire still fucking feels like fire.
Yeah.
What I think,
Yeah.
part of that, I think, plays on to something that I mentioned to Toussaint earlier before recording, that one of the things I liked about this film, and that I think is kind of as blatant or underlying as you want it to be, of that sort of tradition and religiosity versus what modernism is and everything like that. Mm-hmm. And that sort of, if you veil something, or if you kind of drape a cloth over something, it still has the form, but because you can't see what's underneath, everyone thinks it's okay.
Yeah. Fire isn't just fire. It's also this cleansing force that was handed down to us by our many, many generations old elders. And it is an honor to be consumed by fire. And fire is so centric to everything about us. And we love fire.
Until
and
you're
actually,
burnt.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It's like,
Until
but
you
it's
experience
like
it.
you up until that point, fire is just it is not only a physical phenomenon, but it is more of like a theoretical concept that is so central to the ethos of this society. But until then, you were actually in the fire. It's like, you should feel honored for the fact of being engulfed in the fire. It's like, yes, this is great. And then it's like, whoa, this fucking sucks.
Well, and I think part of that actually touches on of the elderly couple, the woman goes first, and the way she jumps, it makes sure that she's gone, like right away.
Yeah.
However,
She gets a 7 out of 10.
The man doesn't even hit the rock.
the man doesn't hit the rock. And
Come on.
Instead,
That's a 5 at best.
4.
He doesn't hit the rock, and he lands feet first.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, and that's
Yeah, that was almost worse.
and I think that was something that I guess it parallels that ending of there's something weirdly glorious in this community of self-sacrifice or putting yourself for the community when really it's shit.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
painful.
Yeah.
And I think in many ways that kind of also represents what Florence's character is going through. She's constantly trying to, I guess, put herself forward and sort of quell everything that's going on underneath her. That she's trying to do, keep face for the community, if you will, within her. Mm-hmm. And yet, when she finally finds that group that screams with her, it's both cathartic because other people are doing it with her, but it's also disturbing because she realizes in that moment that it's a sham in some ways.
Right.
But
does that matter?
Right. At that point, it's the question of, does it really matter?
Right. Yeah. Sort of tangentializing apart from that, one thing that I want to know, coming back to the humor for this, there's one scene that I remember and one quote joke that I wanted to make note of. And the more that I think about it, the more gross and the more juvenile it is to talk about. But I feel like that is sort of the intent. A lot of the humor in this film, as highbrow as a concept of this horror film might be, a lot of it's pretty crass. There's some crass humor in this. When it comes to the love spell.
Oh, my God.
When it comes to the love spell, the guy is literally eating hair pies. That's insane to me. I thought that was fucking gross.
How about the scene when he goes in to talk to the mother, and I can't remember exactly what the ending dialogue
I
of
think
that
she
is.
put pubic hair. I think I ate one of her pubic hairs in
Yeah,
my pie.
that sounds about right.
Yes, that sounds about right. It's like, what the fuck? It's like,
Casual.
yeah.
Well, casual and also not beating around the bush.
Yeah.
I know, it's so gross. What the fuck?
Didn't even try.
I know. You don't
great.
need to cry. It's like, it's that lowbrow. That's what it is.
okay.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
So who wants to go to final ratings?
All right. Let's
Okay.
go final ratings.
Okay, I will go first.
Yeah.
I was a fan of Midsommar, and I'm actually happy to say it. I actually feel like I could raise my rating on another viewing, which I very surprised by after Hereditary, which I did not care for, specifically the ending. But this film is actually quite good. This follows through so many different emotions, from the very visceral, grieving opening to the visceral, totally polar opposite ending. We see the actual parallels between the two sisters. We have the one who literally killed herself to get away from her pain, and then we have the other one who is killing other people to get away from her pain. I know that there's obviously other things happening there, but at the same time, the two polar opposite and parallel directions with the two sisters I think is pretty interesting and is great throughout the entirety of the film, because we have her journey coming from where we start with her until where we get off the train at the ending. And then everything else that is happening with this community and with the people who she comes on this trip with is interesting and at the same time thought-provoking throughout in a good or also bad way. Something that we didn't spend too much time talking about, but the cinematography here is absolutely fantastic. The actual physical landscapes here felt real and felt authentic and feel like it's actually something you're seeing through a camera's lens and not just a crappily animated CGI set.
Yeah.
And in this day and age, all that put together was quite refreshing, especially in a film with this kind of content. So there was a lot happening here that was really good. And even though it wasn't necessarily perfect or anything like that, I was a big fan, and I would definitely recommend this to most people. Maybe not like my mom and dad, but
yes, recommend it to your mom and dad. I want to hear what they think.
I don't want to.
I don't want to.
I remember the one time we brought up Inarutu earlier, but they went to go see Birdman in the theater after I said I thought it was fantastic, and she's like, "I don't know what happened to you," and I was like, "Oh, okay."
I don't know. You're not my son.
Remember, you used to like Back to the Future and Caddyshack, and now you're like this. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
shit.
You can blame me if you want.
Kind of do. So it's a 3.5 out of 5 for me for Midsommar. I thought it was quite good. Moving on to Sam.
Awesome. I think kind of we've touched on a lot of what I would summarize into this piece. I love the richness of colors and things like that. The cinematic craftsmanship, but I also appreciate that it's entirely thought-provoking. And I know, even though we've only had so much time, there are still so many other things I would love to talk about regarding this film. And I think that's what I appreciate about it, is that it still sparks conversation even after you're done viewing it. And this is definitely a film that, I was fine watching Hereditary once. Maybe a second time would be okay.
Right.
But this one, I would not mind watching it again.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's something to be said for, even catching other nuances that now that you're aware of them, that you can try and catch them earlier on or things like that. And I also really appreciate that there's sort of there's more complexity to it than perhaps intended. Or perhaps that's just being projected onto it. But at the same time, there's something... I think this is a well-crafted both story and film itself. And it makes me excited to see if this is what he can do within, dark comedy horror, what he can do with real comedy, what he can do with... other storylines that are maybe not as doom and gloom or
DC
as dark.
superhero movie.
Done. But that sort of artwork to it. And I think as much as it's not a breakup film, I think that there are traits of it that are extremely telling and revealing about relationships, especially in current times when maybe sometimes we need a little reminder as to what is and isn't beneficial within a relationship, whether that be with a romantic partner or the community or yourself. And I think that is what I like, is that there's dynamics for each of those sort of relationships within this one film. So overall, I would say probably about a 3.5, or probably about 3 3/4, if I can do that.
Okay. Yeah.
About 3 3/4. I think that might be the first time it's a weird.
Oh
one.
no, we've had some weird ratings before,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
I appreciate the effort.
Awesome. Okay.
As long as it's between 0 and 5, it's up to you.
I was gonna say, if you tried to give it a 0, there would probably be some debate.
Wait, was that an oblique
Harry Potter reference?
No, not on purpose.
Okay.
That's 9 3/4.
Oh, okay, yeah. All right.
It's okay.
Jesus, Toussaint.
Oh, damn, sorry. Yeah,
Come on, Blaze.
I'm sorry. Blaze. Anyway,
He's a black character.
On to you.
anyway, so I really, I
Sorry, Nick.
I enjoyed Midsommar for all the reasons that I've talked about before. I feel like I've just said everything that I have to say on this film. I think that it is well crafted. If I had one, I loved how much this film was set during the daytime, and almost to the point where I wish it was just daytime all the time, so it would just have that disorienting effect. The film didn't go with that, but I think that's fine. I just love how disorienting that effect was, and how oftentimes the most horrifying things happen in plain sight. and how there are all these sort of like intricate rituals. I originally assumed that this is sort of like an offhand comment that Alex said one time when we were talking about this film some previous time, and there was sort of the suspicion that this was happening every 90 years, every year. I don't think that's true. I thought more about that. I think that
they're doing the sacrifices every year, probably.
They're doing like
for whenever people are reaching that age.
Yeah, but the 90-year thing, that's actually a 90-year thing that happens. But yeah, like there's sort of like a peek into like the horrors of what that world looks like. This is sort of horrors to the outsider, but to them it's just sort of like their way of life.
I mean, although they probably have to have some sort of ritual like this anytime they need new people brought into the flock.
Yeah. Probably. And probably has something. This is a very granular, very specific situation. They probably have like a whole other like series of rituals. Like I read an article from one of the set designers on Polygon that actually went into what the mindset that went into like painting each of those tapestries. And there are some tapestries in the film that are featured that refer to scenes that were filmed but were cut out for whatever reason, or just were never filmed because they just didn't fit into the actual like scheme of the story. And I thought that was really interesting world building on their part, because it's just like you look at some of those, I was like, that looks really fucking morose. Like, I don't want to know what that is. And it's like there's one of those is probably like, well, a guy just wanders in and is like, oh, can I join? He's like, I want to join. It's like, oh man, it's like that's fucked up. I'm like, oh yeah. But
I won't ask which one.
I'm not gonna. I won't ask which one you had to do, but I hope it's not that one.
That's what I was going for.
Yeah. I'm gonna give this a.
Still got that milky prostate on your brain, don't you?
God damn it. Now I can't stop thinking about Milky Chance, that one band. It's like, we don't talk about it. Anyway, I give this a 3.5 out of 5. Okay. I very much enjoyed it. I will probably return to it at some point on home release.
Very good.
Nicholas.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun with this. I thought it was, excuse me. I thought it was chilling. I thought it was hilarious. I thought the character dynamics were pretty well realized, even if they weren't particularly deep. But I absolutely loved the journey that Danny goes on from start to finish. And A24, if you're listening, I would gladly attend a Midsommar camp. So just let me know if you need a counselor or anything like that. Yeah, I'm just saying that, So, yeah. 3.5.
It's unanimous.
No.
Oh, 3 3/4. I'm sorry.
Don't erase her rating.
I can bump it
I know you're like in a cult and you want everyone to be the same. But I'm sorry, Sam, that Alex is being a real mid-bummer right now.
Yeah, I'm sorry that he's been a mid-bummer.
Ooh, apologizing for other people. Ooh, come on.
Such a community move.
Also, I'm sorry on Toussaint's behalf.
What the fuck?
For everything.
Fuck you.
That's pretty good.
And I accept both of the apologies that I extended to
Oh my god, I hate you so much.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So, really positive opinions about Midsommar.
Yeah.
So if you out there have any thoughts on this film or Ari Aster's previous work, feel free to send them on to us at filmtankshow@gmail.com. You could also try to find us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.
Just try to find us.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
You can find old content at Film Tank Show.
I tweet.
Okay.
I do Facebook.
I tweet and Facebook.
Sure.
No, I mean, like, literally, the last, dozen episodes.
No, you've been trying. The
I
rest of
have
us,
been.
The rest of us, not
Thank
as
you.
much.
Not trying, been. Yeah.
No. Anyways.
Yeah.
And then also we have all of our episodes on our website, filmtankshow.com.
Yeah.
And you can find us on Apple Podcasts or also Stitcher at Film Tank Show.
It doesn't sound as good as iTunes.
Well,
I know.
Apple put
Yeah,
that
it's
out of business.
We got to drop this at some point.
Yeah.
6 years from now.
Well,
Man, I miss iTunes.
the last 3 or 4 episode ending bumpers.
Yeah.
We
I mean, the first
discussed
time it
the
made sense.
Apple. Oh yeah.
And
But
then
at
since
a certain
then,
point, they haven't really been iTunes podcasts in forever. Even if people were saying that, so I'm just anyway.
I tried this time.
Yeah.
No.
Toussaint brought us down, but that's
Tom,
okay.
shut up, man. Sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah.
So, next episode, we're going to have another 2019 film, and that is the new Quentin Tarantino project, which is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
The fuck was that?
I wanted to say Once Upon a Time in America, and that's different.
you froze,
Yeah, different movie.
So, that's why
I wonder if Tarantino
Oh, boy.
named his movie in correlation with a trend that was happening in the 60s in both abroad and American filmmaking with specific regards to the genre of Western popularized by people like Sergio Leone and America's favorite, Clint Eastwood. Father of Scott Eastwood.
Thank you.
Cut his mic.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Nick, for that. I think we will answer that question and more on our episode of Film Tank regarding that film.
Oh, so now you just kind of ruined it.
He did. That's okay. Anyways, that film, which stars Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio and Margot Robbie, is coming out, and we will spend time talking about the 9th film in Tarantino's collection coming up on episode 198.
Oh, boy.
I know. So, from Sam, who always is a pleasure to have you, so thank you for joining us again.
Thank you for
Always.
having me join you guys. I enjoy being here and chatting with you.
I enjoy having you.
Thanks. Back at you.
Oh.
We enjoy having you. Thanks.
Back at you.
So from Sam, Toussaint, Nick, and myself, thank you very much again for joining us here on Film Tank, and we'll catch up with you again next time.